Well, it is 9 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. We have one business item, and this is, although when you get a business item like this, one is enough, right? So it is, we're here to discuss the water and sewer utility fund for FY27, which of course hinges upon the water treatment plant rehabilitation and PFAS mitigation. So I'll turn it over to, I guess, the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning.
Well, hold on just a second. Council members, I'm sorry. Is there anything you'd like to say before we start? Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Good morning. We are here to talk about the water and sewer utility, as the mayor just mentioned. This is a special workshop. Typically, we would do this as part of the other ones, but because there's some significant capital items that we have been discussing now for a few months, both at the council presentation back in May and then at the first, as a town hall, I should say, recently. So we've taken the time to go through and look at different scenarios. Just to remind the council, a year ago when we started this effort, one of the ideas we had was obviously looking at a city solution to mitigate for PFAS, but we were also concurrently working on water plant improvements, a water plant master plan. So those two items were following a parallel path. We also contemplated whether there was opportunities to address the PFAS specifically through some sort of connection with other jurisdictions that provide water or have water. So we approached both the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County. And they were both great. I want to commend and thank them for their assistance. So the city of Tampa, after going through this over several months, basically told us that because of some of the capacity limitations they have, this was not going to be viable for them. So we've moved on from them. The county, we continue to talk with the county. It potentially could be viable with the county just from a pure, yes, we can provide the water. Again, the county does not have its own water. It doesn't generate its own water. It buys water from Tampa Bay Water, so that adds another wrinkle there. But there's some logistical challenges that Jason, our Public Works Director, is going to go through this morning as part of that effort. And we're going to basically allow you to see a comparison of those things. First, Jason will show, again, just trying to make connections and what that would mean in the ground physically throughout our community. At the end of Jason's presentation, I'll be talking about the financial pieces to compare the two scenarios. We also will contemplate a temporary solution. We did look into the temporary solution and had to drill down to make sure that it was the solution and the financial impact of it was commensurate with the type of study and findings we found from when we did our pilot. Because if you'll recall, as was mentioned during one of the presentations, because of the nature of our water and both the hardness of the water and the PFAS, we were finding that when you use sort of a temporary granulated activated carbon, which is one of the solutions, that you had to change the media, the filtration media, more frequently. So that impacts the cost, and we'll talk about that as well. So, and at the end of my portion, after Jason's done, then I will turn it over to Peter Napoli, who's here in the audience. Peter's with Stantec, and he will run through the different pro formas and rates, rate analysis suggestions for you as well. Ultimately, it's going to be, I know you can't make a decision today, but we would ask for some direction so that we can kind of put together that preliminary budget and present it and forward it to you. We also have a representative from our financial advisors firm here this morning should we have questions that require his assistance as well. So without any more to be said, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
So the first slide here is the information we received back from Hillsborough County as far as connection locations. The county offered 3 connection locations as part of their openness to the city connect to their system. So as you can see, the 3 connections, one at the north, middle, and the south part of the city. The north and the south create the most challenges as far as where they're located and then getting them back to the water plant. The bottom 2,500 feet, now those numbers there represent the county portion of their cost estimate as far as what the city would have to fund as far as their connection piece. So the middle option, the 4,800 feet, and then the 550. So that's the combination of the Tampa Bay Water connection piece and Hillsborough County. So there's a dual piece to that. So the middle option was the most economic as far as getting it to the water plant. It's the shortest distance. It's 3.2 miles of pipe. It would be a 24-inch pipe. So when we look at how we're getting it to the water plant, this would be the proposed route of path for the water line. This gets it through a wetland under I-75, down Morris Bridge Road, under Fowler, across Hillsborough River, westbound on Fowler to Gillette, and then down to Whiteway to the plant. So when we break this down and we look at what is impacted here, first there's a swift mud parcel, which is wetland. We would have to cross the wetland to get to a Hillsborough County owned parcel. And again, we would have to require easements and right away to be on these parcels to do this work. There's one small piece of a privately owned parcel next to I-75 that's shaded in yellow. Cross that and then do the jack and bore under 75 to get to Morris Bridge Road. On Morris Bridge Road, there is a small stream there, Cowhouse Creek. So we would have to put an elevated structure, and I'll show you pictures of what this looked like later. But cross Cowhouse Creek, follow Morris Bridge down to the intersection at Fowler, get under Fowler to the south side, and then travel across the Hillsborough River, and then come down Fowler and to Gillette to Whiteway. So when we look at the more granular into this, this is the wetland piece. So we would have to connect to the county's water line, which is an 84-inch water line on the west side of the bypass canal. Attach there, go across the wetland to get to the Hillsborough County piece. The photos on the left side, those are just the current conditions of what it looks like out there. So slope 170, I-75, where the jack and bore would come through. The Morris Bridge right-of-way, which is now city road, so it's the city right-of-way, and then crossing 127th. When you travel down to the Cowhouse Creek area, there's the bridge structure that would need to be there. We anticipated, and we'll get to the number piece of this, about a 200-foot aerial crossing to get across that small creek. Continue on Morris Bridge till you get to Fowler, and then jack and bore under Fowler to get to the south side, and then the Fowler Avenue Bridge over the Hillsborough River. We currently have a water line that's hanging on the side of the bridge to the south side, but this being a 24-inch pipe, it would need its own structure due to weights. It would be a concrete structure. So then once we're beyond the Hillsborough River, traveling down Fowler Avenue, we get to Gillette. We would have to travel south on Gillette through the right-of-way, get to Whiteway, travel through the water right-of-way to get to the water plant. This is just more of the current conditions. I'm sorry, I'll jump back here. So in this process, one of the considerations that, just to emphasize on this process, I'll go back to Gillette. The work on Gillette, as we looked at mapping this out in construction, Gillette alone from Fowler to Whiteway would be a construction period of 4 to 6 months. Not the entire roadway, but it would be a continual process of 4 to 6 months of construction on that roadway. The right-of-ways are tight out there. To do a 24-inch water main on Gillette, there needs to be 16 feet of work for the pipe, and then another additional 8 feet for the equipment to do the work in that area. So essentially the entire roadway would be dug up, barring that it's in the middle of the roadway. We would dig the entire roadway up, put the pipe in, and then have to reconstruct everything on the backside. So it's a pretty substantial process to get through there. Again, doing it in phases, it's going to take a couple months to get down there. The same way for Whiteway. When you consider Whiteway, the right-of-way is wide on Whiteway, but with the other current infrastructure and the size of the pipe, it essentially is probably going to need to be right down the middle of the road. The construction period for Whiteway would be significantly longer because the run is a longer distance. So that's the county connection piece. That just lays out how we get to the plant. The next slide I have here is, just the process that CHA did for the master plan, the study that the city council authorized and approved and staff worked on. We had them lay out the improvements for the water plant. all the improvements that are happening at the water plant stay on site or on city property across the street. So there's not a large impact to the roadway. There would be some crossings from the northern parcel down to Whiteway, but as far as public impact, it would be minimal compared to the Hillsborough County connection.
Thank you, Jason. So just going to talk now about the financial impact. So this first spreadsheet is the county connection solution. So I'm going to go through all the numbers, and I'll be deferring to Jason if there are any technical questions about any specific cell. But starting at the top, and I will try and illustrate here the costs that are specific to the county versus the next slide will be the city connection, which is going to look similar in many respects. So there's going to be $5 million in new plant piping. You see there, I'm going to get top from bottom from FY29. Electrical improvements for Whiteway, $1.5 million. Electrical improvements for Sunningdale, $1.6 million. Tank upgrades, $1.5 million. And then disinfection, $5 million. And if you go down, then you're at construction manager, which is basically, I believe we used a 1% number here. $112,080 over several years there. You've got the general water plant rehab at $8 million. You have plant demolition in the last year of the project at about $2 million. And then we have the real bulk of the county costs here, which is the transmission main to Whiteway, $47,500,000. And then the Tampa Bay Water connection, which is on the county side. So the county is going to have to do some work to bring the water to the point where it connects with the city so we can bring it to us. Excuse me, and that's $10,500,000 according to their estimate. To Jack and Bore under I-75, we're looking at, we estimate $1.75 million. And then to do an elevated water crossing over the Hillsborough River, about $8.1 million. So the project cost in terms of capital, you're looking at about $93 million. Now, I want to stress, these are estimates. This is not even a sort of, engineer's estimate that you might get when you go out to bid where it's been really, really articulated at the very granular level. This is a broader estimate. The county numbers that were provided to us, again, were done, even the county admits they were done back of the envelope on their end. We had to add the costs for going under 75 and going over the river, for example. Those were not contemplated in the county numbers originally. So we had to do a lot of, again, educated estimation here. So I just want you to understand that these numbers, by the time you go a year, 2 years from now to actually go to construction, these numbers could look different. The other thing also that is not contemplated here necessarily directly is the permitting costs for some of these things. For example, going under I-75. To me, that sounds very daunting. I'm not trying to dissuade the council from considering this, but I-75, usually it's not even just an FDOT issue. You might have some influence from the Federal Highway Administration. So that will, at a minimum, add time, if not cost, to the project over potentially what we're estimating. So again, we're just trying to give you sort of the best guess that we have right now based on the information at hand. So again, that would be a capital cost of $93 million. The project length for the county is slightly longer than the city. So you're going to see the city option is about 4 to 5 years. The county option is 5 to 6, because again, you're building this pipeline across the community, and that will take quite some time because you have to contemplate. It's not just putting the pipe in the ground, it's acquiring right-of-way easements, and also the right-of-way costs are not contemplated in this estimate because we really don't have a way to gauge that right now in terms of giving you a real solid number. So property costs are not in here. Any kind of survey work related to the property costs are not in here as well, so those numbers have to be considered at some point. So that will take longer, and just obviously we know from our experience on Fowler over the last few years that whenever you do anything underground, particularly for that length, it is very likely you will find a complication. Something will be there. There'll be a conflict that could generate, a loss of time and an increase in the cost. So that's the capital side. Now, we also considered, at the council's request, we looked at an interim solution. So we have at the bottom here, and we've just kept it separate for illustration purposes. So you can bring in granulated activated carbon on skids basically, and bring it into the plant. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's not just coming in on a trailer, putting it in, plugging it in. It's not that simple. There's a permitting process that will take several months, if not a year, to get that approved through the regulatory agencies. There's also some upgrades that need to be done at the plant to get that ready for that. The options you could have, you could rent the equipment. If you rent the equipment, it was $2.6 million basically a year to rent the equipment. And if you rent the equipment, unfortunately, you couldn't finance it through the bond. And because it was $2.6 million estimated a year to rent it, it made more sense to buy it in our mind. So we're putting, what we have here is the cost to purchase the equipment for $5.5 million. If you do buy it, you could fund it again through the bond. So we put here $5.5 million to purchase the equipment. And then the part that is really the cost driver is the replacement of the media, as I mentioned at the very outset today. Because of the nature of our water, if this were another type of water system, you may only have to replace that granulated activated carbon media and reactivate it maybe every 6 months. Here, you're going to end up having to do it based on our pilot testing experience probably every 45 days. And it's $750,000 each time you reactivate the media for that level of this plant here. So when you do the math, it's $5.25 million potentially to do that in a given year. So do 7 times basically in a given year to reactivate the carbon. So that adds to $5.25 million per year. We estimated here about 4 years to cover the time it would take before we were fully on the county and we're buying water from the county. So that's a significant, as I mentioned, significant influence on the final price here. The counties, working with the county, buying water from them, using their water would require some additional water treatment on our end. That'd be about $50,000 a year. You see that noted there at the bottom. And then the county obviously would be buying water. So by the time we get the plant up and running, we're estimating to buy water would cost in the first year $5,123,067. And then that cost would continue on annually based upon whatever pricing for water we would get from the county, who in turn gets it. It's a pass-through from the county, from Tampa Bay Water. So these are the costs, again, so 5 to 6 years for the county solution. I'm going to now go on to the city solution. Again, this is the solution that was part of the water master plan. This is contemplating a nanofiltration system at the plant. And it does include a deep injection well. I know the deep injection well raised some concern with the council, and we understand that. I think Jason made a good point to me recently. He said, with the deep injection well, what's happening there is we are pulling the water from the aquifer with the PFAS in it, so the aquifer has water with PFAS. We're pulling it up, we're filtering out, and we're mixing it with water and putting it back into the ground. So you're not adding anything new that wasn't already in the subsurface of this community. That's a point I think that's worth considering. The deep injection well would obviously take it further down below the aquifer, whereas you get it originally from the aquifer, you're actually putting it lower than the aquifer. So in this model here, the city solution, you have new plant piping here, about $4 million. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm sorry. We forgot to move the clicker. City solution here, so new plant piping, $4 million. Electrical improvements here on Whiteway would be $2.3 million. On Sunnydale, $1.6. The exploratory well here is $7 million. Then there's the deep well at $25 million. Construction manager here, because of the scale, slightly less, $93,400. General water plant rehab is, again, you've got I think that's $31 million right there all across. That's largely driven by the nanofiltration system. You got plant demolition at $2 million. And that adds up to a capital cost of about $73 million. Operating and maintenance here, the deep well would require about $80,000 a year in operating and maintenance costs. And then the temporary solution is the same for equipment purchase as it was on the county solution. The time frame is slightly less because the project is a little bit less. It's a little bit more compact in the county, but it would be the same amount per year. It would just be perhaps we could save a year versus the other solution. And this would be, again, 4 to 5 years is what we would contemplate. And that is this portion. So if you have questions, I could answer questions now, or we could bring Mr. Napoli up to go through some rate scenarios. What's really the preference of the council?
Council questions? I have some. So,
Yep.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Okay, so I have a question for you about the county and their PFAS remediation. Does any of this pricing contemplate what the county might need to do and any increase in the cost to the consumer for that project?
So the county, again, the county doesn't generate water. So the county's not doing anything.
They're just buying it
They're
straight.
just buying it straight from Tampa Bay Water. What we understand from discussions that we've had with Tampa Bay Water at the outset of our due diligence a year ago, and also recently with the county, is that Tampa Bay Water, they have multiple sources for their water system. So they've got a desalination plant, they've got surface water, river, groundwater, and so they're able to manipulate their water system to mitigate some of that. Now, there may be some additional filtration that they're working on. They did not tell us that originally, that they were, they didn't say, well, we're doing this. What they did tell us was that where they found PFAS was in their groundwater source in Brandon. The counties recently told us that they're looking to expand some of their surface water intake, which to me strikes me as probably a way to mitigate and get more surface water in, which in their case probably has a lower PFAS number and blend. But they've not articulated anything that we're aware of that says, okay, yes, we're going to do this massive, except expand water supply. That they've told us. They're expanding their source allocation. But I've not heard anything about any sort of other improvement that they're doing.
Okay, but if they're going to expand their source allocation to increase groundwater, there's got to be a place to hold it. There has to be some kind of project to create a holding space, and Tampa Bay Water, so the process would be Tampa Bay Water manages the acquisition and the distribution out of their acquisition or holding sites, and they charge according to their costs for projects. Mm-hmm. So Hillsborough County, and by definition Temple Terrace, if we were to connect to this system, would be dependent on Tampa Bay Water pricing.
Yes, you would. I mean, that is the thing. You would lose, and I don't mean to say this to sway you, but you would lose some level of control that you have today. Because today we generate our own water, it's our own wells. You would be dependent upon another party and their pricing structure. Now, I assume what at least we'd request is in some sort of interlocal agreement here that would hopefully allow us to have some cost control, or at least some cost forecasting at a minimum. But at this point, I'm not sure if that's how that would work out, if that's feasible. We would not, one thing to make clear here is that the county solution does not contemplate us becoming part of the Tampa Bay Water Cooperative. That would be the process that we have been discouraged from pursuing, because it would require changing their charter, a significant bureaucratic administrative process that they are not willing to entertain. And so in essence, again, we would just be, we'd be like a sub-purchaser through the county. They'd still have to, the Tampa Bay Water process, they'd still have to make some sort of a change, but it wouldn't be the monumental charter revision and things of that nature. So that's why it would still take some time to get Tampa Bay Water to sign off.
That time period, customer of Hillsborough County,
we'd be
a large institutional customer.
Correct, and there'd be a master meter put on the water, probably at our water plant. Because we talked to the county about this, how will they bill us, and they'd put a master meter probably where the pipe ends at the water plant, and then we would pay them. Now, one thing is, we do provide some water to the county today, to that general area where the crossing would be. In fact, because the county doesn't have capacity to reach some of its customers outside of our utility zone, and so they buy water from us. There is a scenario here where we've not talked about this with the county. We're just anticipating that if this connection were to happen, that we would probably lose that revenue coming into the city. And that revenue is how much, Jason?
Roughly $1 million.
Roughly $1 million to our fund, because they're making this connection now. They'd probably be able to supply their own customers with the water that they're bringing from their own system.
Okay, but it would reduce revenue to the city because right now they're buying that amount of water from the city, but it would reduce the amount of water that the city would need to distribute.
Correct.
So then we would essentially so right now, if we're distributing 5 million gallons and it includes 1 million to that area, we would need to be buying 4 million gallons instead of 5
Sorry.
if we're not distributing to that area.
It's not 1 million gallons.
I'm just throwing numbers. It's not
Yeah.
an exact.
So the water production and the dollar, they're separate. So the million, it's $1 million of lost revenue, not 1 million gallons
No.
of water.
Yeah, but
1 million was a bad example. So let's say we're supplying 50,000 gallons of water to that area. And right now, we produce 5 million gallons of water to serve all of our customers. If we're no longer buying that, or if we're no longer supplying that 50,000 gallons, now we're only supplying, a little 4,950,000 gallons. So we're not going to be buying the full 5 million that we're supplying. We would be buying less. So yes, we're going to lose that revenue, but we would also have to buy commensurately less from Tampa Bay Water through Hillsborough County.
potentially, potentially, it's probably a surcharge on the water we sell, correct? Yeah, there's a small surcharge. Yeah, so
Okay.
the numbers, you're on the right track. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So then, in this analysis regarding Hillsborough County, are there, the ongoing expense, we don't know, it's an estimate, but you think that because I didn't see any ongoing expense or operating for our staff that would need to be there. Did we just leave that out because that would be the same if we upgrade our system?
Correct. So we looked at that, and at this point, we feel we'd probably need to have the same level of staff. Now, obviously, with technology, 5-10 years from now, there could be some differences. But because of the level of water we provide, we're required to have 24-hour staffing. If we were a smaller water system, you could probably get away with having just the remote monitored over the night shift. But we're not able to do that. Now, if those regulations change at some point in the future, yes, that would help. At this point, we still have to have people there at the plant 24/7, regardless of whether we're producing the water ourselves or we're distributing the water, because they're still controlling the distribution of the system. That is correct, right, Jason? Yep.
Okay, so then you talked a little bit about the permitting potential and the cost of the right-of-way. With the Hillsborough County system, would we need to actually purchase right-of-way, like, eminent domain, take some amount of land or something in order to do this connection?
Yes. Well, I wouldn't say eminent domain. We try to avoid eminent domain if we can. But if I could just go back here, I should give you an illustration. So I know it's a little tough to see, but the first piece is we're crossing through a number of different properties right at the outset. So the first piece is the wetland piece through the Swift-Mud property. Now, I'm assuming Swift-Mud, a quasi-governmental entity, perhaps they would be okay with us doing this. We'd have to obviously go through the process to acquire the property rights and do that. The wetlands will create a permitting issue for sure that we'll have to address. Then, as you can see, the pipe there is going north. It goes north initially. The reason it's going north is we're trying to go through that red parcel. That red parcel is a county parcel. Now, we don't know which county agency has any intention of using that parcel, what they want to use it for. It could be that this plan, once it's vetted through the county and their staff, they could say, wait a minute, we have some strategy for that property, and maybe where we want to put this pipe is not conducive to the development plan. But rather than go through the parcels beneath it to the south that were privately held, we assume going through the county would be simpler. Doesn't necessarily mean that, but that was an assumption. So again, that's something that's a property owner we'd have to address. The yellow right next to it is a private property owner right along the 75. Again, we would have to try and negotiate a right-of-way acquisition. We would try to do this as a sort of a typical market arm's length negotiation. If we got to the point that we couldn't, then we would we would try to use some sort of eminent domain. We'd have to articulate and check with legal as to, does that qualify for eminent domain? As you probably know, when you do eminent domain, it's more costly because you are now paying attorney's fees for the other side as well. And so it's not, you typically want to avoid that if you can. And then going under, goes under 75, so we've talked about what that would be from a property situation. And Morris Bridge, coming down Morris Bridge, we might have enough right-of-way there so we can stay entirely in the public right-of-way. When you cross over Fowler, getting down to Gillette and Whiteway, that's probably an area where we just don't know enough yet, whether we're going to be, the right-of-way is not as that expansive necessarily. So as Jason said, but there's not a lot of sidewalk, swale area as well. So we may just end up being in the middle of the road. So maybe it's not so much a right-of-way issue there in terms of acquisition as it is a disruption to the motorist public and things like that, and the time it takes to do that.
Okay, so I just have a couple more questions. And one is, when we repaired the sewer line that was damaged during the last hurricane season, that went well over the estimate. How did you come to the estimate for the construction of this pipe?
Sure. So the county provided us an estimate based on their most recent work of $1,100 a linear foot. And as I said during the presentation, that was just based on pipe in the ground. It wasn't taking into account going under 75, building a bridge over Cowhouse Creek, building a bridge structure over the river. So we had to then articulate what those costs might be for those structures. And then for going under Jack and Boer, under Fowler as well, the county really didn't consider that also. So Jason, you want to talk about how you came to those numbers?
So there are industry standards and there's recent projects that helped get us to those numbers. Recently, there was a significant waterline project in North Carolina that had very similar scenario to what we're doing. It doesn't cross major waterways, but it was a very similar construction. So using those numbers and then industry standards and then construction metrics for the Tampa Bay region, that's how we got to the numbers for this construction project. The Jack and Boer costs, we took into consideration the Fowler sewer crossing repair, but as we put in the slides in the internal documents there's a large contingency that's going to be needed for those projects just because we don't know exactly everything that's underground. We have an idea of Fowler and 62nd Street or Ridgedale, but not out there where we're going to be in a different area.
Okay, and then I just have one more question. For the investment in the Temple Terrace plant option, is nanofiltration a viable temporary solution? I know we've talked about it regardless of which project we choose, we've talked about wanting to do a temporary solution, but if we were to invest in the Temple Terrace option, nanofiltration is the suggested remedy or choice. So it would make sense that if we were going to put a temporary solution there, it would be a solution that we could use going forward if we choose the Temple Terrace investment.
One of the challenges with the nano is the effluent. To make it a temporary solution, you'd have to have the disposal piece up front before you'd put the nano in, and at that rate, just in the plan, it would be prudent to put the nano in as you're building the disposal factor, and just have it as your solution at the end. To do it as a temporary, I mean, you're basically going to do the same steps on a basically movable scale, and then have to do it again. You would repeat the process. So nano, even with the granular activated carbon, upfront challenge we have is the current pumps and piping are not to the size they need. We can't push the pressures we need to maintain city water pressure to the customers with going through additional treatment process. So we would have to increase the pumps, we'd have to increase the pipes to get more water, more volume through these treatment solutions to get them out to the public. So nano as a temporary is tough to do. Because if nanos are in game, then we would do it on a small scale and then change it to the big scale at the end, but we'd have the same disposal problems.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, a couple. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. On your presentation, you talked about the Temple Terrace option could be at least a year earlier than the county option. Is that correct? In the construction?
So it could be, yes. And the regulatory process with the timelines we're stuck with, we would need to push that and make sure we get done.
Okay, thanks. And if we chose the county Tampa Bay option, we would buy the water from the county or Tampa Bay Water. And then we would still have our monthly rates to our residents on top of that to maintain our infrastructure that we totally have. So do you have any idea on cost estimate per monthly bill? I mean, it sounds to me Tampa Bay Water and the county is going to be much more expensive than our option to the
So,
resident in the monthly bill, not in total, well, in total dollars too, but in the monthly bill.
so Mr. Napoli, when his portion of the presentation is, when he's up, he's going to go through some rate scenarios. He's going to be looking primarily at the first few years of the pro forma here. So when you get out to the out years in terms of cost, for the extra water costs, I don't necessarily know if that's something that he would have factored in at this point. He's going to talk to you about rate increases to support some of these improvements that is evident in some of the other capital that's in our 5-year plan. But I would just say, if you keep an open mind to what he says in terms of the rate for the 5-year plan, and just contemplate out by year 6, for example, whenever we're ready to buy the water, then you're talking about right now, based on what we know today, an extra $5 million on top of that. So there'll be an impact on the working rate based on that operational cost. I just don't have that quantified right now in terms of what that might be that far out.
Thank you. And the last one I have, so with the city option, there's no disruption to our residents for years of roads being torn up and all that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Councilmember Schuster.
Yes. Where is the tie-in for that option? Is it on the other side of the bypass canal or our side?
From what we understand, the county's actually already got the water over to the western side of the canal, so it's on our side.
Okay. All right. So we got Swift Mud to deal with, the interstate, whoever is going to be judging that. Going over the river, we got to go through the Army Corps for that, because they can do the Army Corps of Engineers. And we're going to come back to the county. And we're going to come back to any individual private concerns. And then that, I'm sure one's not going to, it's going to have to be done in progression to get all these permittings. We won't be able to go out for it all at once. Okay, so that's going to take an awful long time to get that all done. Second question is, when we do our calculations, are we assuming an upcharge between Tampa Bay Water to the county to us?
They didn't indicate that when they talked about preliminary conversations with the county staff. Is basically they were seeing it more as of a pass-through.
Yes, sir.
Because we were paying for all the capital up front. So every single capital cost associated with this on their side of the border and our side, we're going to pay for. So that's really our bulk investment.
And we went awful quickly through that. What was their cost going to be for us to be able to tie in, to make it able to tie in the 84-inch?
So the county cost, the capital cost?
Yeah.
Is the capital cost is $93 million roughly?
No.
Sorry?
I mean, for us to tie into their water main, I think there was a charge you said that we had to do to make it accessible for
So the
84 to 24.
Right. So the transmission main there's 2 components here. So two of the biggest components. On the county side of the border, they're going to pass this cost on to us, but there's a $10,500,000 investment for them to bring their piping and upgrade their piping to get to the point where it can, meet our demand. And then there's the transmission from that point, building that transmission line from that point to the Whiteway plant, about $47.5 million is the rest of that cost there.
So we're looking soup to nuts about $94 million to accomplish the county option, correct?
Yeah, it's about 93 million.
We don't have a screen up.
Yeah,
so I don't-
over, just slightly over 93 million. Again, these are estimates, again.
I know.
Trying to, want to make sure everybody understands that.
Okay.
By the time you build, these numbers could change.
Plus the disruption to the city and everything, and to our residents in order to get this done. And hope to God there's nothing in between under the ground.
And I'd like to, if I could, pick up on what the council member is saying in terms of the permitting piece. If you think about it, there's probably 4, 5, 6 different regulatory agencies that we will have to interact with. The wetlands will probably trigger the DEP review. EPC locally may have some say in it. I probably just mostly DEP. Obviously, South Florida Water Management District will have a say. That we mentioned the FDOT, but also the Federal Highway Administration potentially. DOH will have an enormous say because they regulate the water treatment facility. Am I missing? Oh, the Port Authority, the Army Corps potentially because of the river issues. So we're going to spend a fair amount of time in permitting. To give you an understanding of scale, if you look at the Riverside Park project, for example, I believe we discussed that at the county. We got the green light back in February, and we're still working on permitting. And with, still going through the permitting for a small park it's not nearly as complicated as this. So I don't want to make light of the fact that the permitting will probably take at least a year. I mean, it could take longer. Now, there's some things we may be able to do in the interim in terms of like plant upgrades, things like that we can get started. But the other, it's just going to take a while. I mean, it's going to be a complex project.
That's all I have for now.
Councilmember Kravitz.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you circulate these documents by email, please?
Sure.
And the other question is related to that. Were these documents only prepared yesterday after close of business?
So as I was stating, I stated in an email yesterday. So we have been, in fact, Jason and I were working on this overnight in terms of putting the final touches because there's a lot of detail here. We also, as we typically would do, and you know this council member is before the budget workshops, we typically would give you, so here's a draft budget, here's a draft pro forma. In this instance here, we don't really know what you want to do. So we didn't really feel we could presuppose you're going to go in one way or the other, and here's a rate schedule, and here's the pro forma, and here's all that. So as I mentioned in an email that I circulated to the council yesterday, the goal would be today, see if we can get some direction as to, would you like us to pursue an option? Then we can finalize a sort of the draft preliminary budget and get that to you before the end of this week. So you'd have that, and with the pro forma as well. You'll see the pro forma right now when Mr. Napoli comes up, a version of it. But again, there were so many moving parts here. It was really hard for staff to just contemplate, okay, what would you like to do?
I'll just make it simpler. When that email was sent, these documents didn't exist yet?
We had some of them. We were still working on finalizing, make sure everything was straight.
So I was just trying to figure out how much of an ambush this is, and it doesn't sound like it's too much of an ambush, but it's still difficult to process all of this as it comes in real time. I was literally taking photos off the screen to try and figure out where the numbers stand. So anyway, thank you for the detail on that. And I would like to see the city solution slide if that's possible.
Sure, Brian, can you pull it up?
Okay. So can you please point out to me where in this budget the filtration solution is?
Sure, it's under the general water plant rehab line.
Okay. So that's 8, 16, 24,
31 million?
31 million. So that is how much it will cost to install the complete filtration solution, and then that's based on CHA's numbers?
I believe so, yes.
And then we have the deep well, that's 25?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I flipped back and forth between these two slides. The construction manager in the previous one cost 112, but here it's 93. Is there a discount when they're working on local projects?
I believe it's done as a percentage of the project cost.
Okay. Is that how they're paid?
Yes, typically when you do an estimate, there's a 1 to 3% is the sort of the industry standard to figure out how much it might be for this cost. So that I believe staff used percentage to be consistent with the other one.
Okay. My understanding when we talked about it previously was that it was going to be a salaried position that we were going to hire internally.
We might be able to hire internally. We could contemplate both. We have not made a decision. Obviously, we don't know what the council wants to do here, so we've not made a decision yet. And whatever we would do, we'd come to the council, obviously, for approval.
The disinfection, that has something to do with the quality of the water coming in from the county that we don't have when we have a local solution, is that?
Yeah, you want to talk to the disinfection?
So with the transmission being as far as it's coming from the county, there's additional, and the county had recommended this to us in their proposal, is adding additional disinfection to the system. So when it goes through our pipe, through the county pipes to us, to our system and back out, that it's of good quality.
Okay, got it. And the tank upgrades, that was another big item that was in the county spreadsheet, but not in the local spreadsheet. And I wonder, why are we upgrading the tanks for the county, but not for our own project?
So on the county end, we need a receiving tank, about 1 million gallon facility to bring in their water and hold it so that we can then do the additional treatments, put it into the current tanks, and then send it out to distribution.
Okay, so it's like a intermediate reservoir.
Correct.
And then about the electrical upgrades, I think again, the spreadsheets aren't in front of me, but I think there was a difference there in the cost for the electrical upgrades. Is there a reason for that?
Correct. So in the county option, some of the equipment we have, we would not maintain. So that would be the delta going to the lower end. But in the city system, we would have to maintain all of what we have, plus do the upgrades to the new system for the nanofiltration.
And then I think probably close to the last question about the county option was there was a $10 million connector that is county side, and that was listed as a budget item on our end. Who retains ownership of that, and what are we paying for something to upgrade the county's infrastructure, or what is that?
Yep. So that is the initial portion from the Tampa Bay Water to get it off of the main distribution to a point where then it would connect to the county-owned pipe. But yes, the funding for both of those would be part of the city's responsibility to connect.
And then they're maintaining it?
So we would assume that they're maintaining it. It's outside of the city limits, and it's part of their system. But we've not drilled down to that level of asking that specific question, but that would be our assumption.
Okay, so we're paying for something that they're going to own and maintain potentially. And when it comes to the $1 million that we're selling to the county presently, that's revenue, not margin, right? So what is the margin on that?
Do you know the margin? We'd have to get back to you on that one.
Because it sounds like we're losing a lot of money, but if it's, if we're selling it at a loss, or if we're only making $1 for every 100, then it's not really.
Good question. We'll find out.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's see. The temporary solution is the next topic that I'm going to address here. When we began discussing it with CHA, the consultant, and I know that he has said some things that have shown themselves to not be completely 100% on point, that these temporary tanks would be about $3 million, and now I see that it's about 350% more than that. So where did these numbers come from?
Sure. So he wasn't off in the sense of when you said $3 million. If you want to rent it, it's $2.6 million a year, basically. So I think that's where he was getting that number, because staff actually approached the provider of this service, and it'd be about $2.64 million a year to rent. And then we asked, well, okay, well, how much does it cost if we wanted to buy the equipment? And if you wanted to buy, it's at $5.5 million. So that's why we thought, based on the scope of this project, it'd make more sense to buy it. And again, you could finance it through the bond. Right. Then the cost for the filtration is really the largest portion of this calculation here. As I was mentioning, in a different water system, perhaps that doesn't have water as hard as ours, you might be able to get away with just doing it every 6 months, because that's what the vendor, when he told us, was like, oh yeah, sure, it's $2.6 million to rent, and it'll be $1.5 million a year, basically, to change out the meter. You could be doing it once every 6 months. But then of course, we know that our water, based on our pilot testing, that the PFAS, keeping the PFAS under the 4 parts per trillion, when we used the bench testing, the pilot testing for granulated activated carbon, about 45 days in, it would stop doing that. It would not be able to keep it below 4 parts per trillion. And so because of that experience, that's one of the reasons why we didn't recommend as a permanent solution the GAC, because we know it wasn't going to work well with our system. So because of that, if for a temporary solution using GAC, then we had to up that number not from once every 6 months, but now once every 45 days. And so that's 750,000 times 7, basically, is where this 5.2 million number comes from.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to have a little more accurate information about that, so thank you for stress testing that. That actually relates to this next question too, which is, has it been your experience so far that it was accurate when CHA said that we can use some of the equipment that we're purchasing for the temporary solution in the permanent solution, that would transfer over into the final project?
We talked about this as well. You could do that. In my estimation, it'd be redundant. It'd almost be like you'd have like a fail-safe, but it's a fail-safe in a way that wouldn't really work on its own. So it's not truly a fail-safe, because let's say that for some catastrophic reason, nanofiltration stopped working one day. The granulated activated carbon that you kept, if you kept this, tied to the plant, it's not going to be able to, as I said, you'd have to, every 45 days, you still have to change it out. So it's not really a viable fail-safe, and that could on its own just in perpetuity work, because it would cost too much. Now, if you buy the equipment and you keep it and you decide, you know what, it would help to just have even more filtration, and maybe that makes the water, even from a quality perspective, even better, and you already have the system, you obviously probably had to do, there'd be some other costs associated with making it part of the permanent solution. Then if that's what you'd like to do, that's something that, yes, it could be done, but I don't want to mislead people into thinking that, if the plant stops working from the nano perspective, that the GAC that's fine, we can just flip a switch and just keep doing that. You could, but it would cost you a tremendous amount of money.
Well, I mean, I remember there was some bottled water company that used to brag about being double filtered, but I think that's probably not the goal here. I would personally find it very disappointing if we had a filtering solution that required a second filter. So I think we should build to make sure that whatever filter we have in there will provide us a really good quality of water. Just as an aside. So it sounds like it's not true that we can use the temporary equipment, in which case, 2 questions come from that. First one, why not rent it? And second of all, if we do purchase it, can it be sold later for some kind of revenue? So
Again, as part of the why not rent it, to me, it doesn't really financially seem to make sense to rent it versus buying it, because if it's $2.6 million a year to rent it, in a couple of years, you already paid the cost of what it would cost to buy it. And so if this project, if you're contemplating that this project could take, again, several years, that's why I think it would, in one part, why it makes sense to purchase it. Now, again, mind you, we don't know the lead times necessarily. It could be that if you buy it, maybe it will take us, significant amount of time. I don't have that level of detail just yet. The other part of this is, as I was mentioning earlier, is that if you wanted to finance this purchase through the bond, you'd have to buy it. Like, you can't, the bond laws, and you couldn't use the bond proceeds to pay for equipment that you're going to rent and then give back.
One thing that might be worth looking into is a lease purchase agreement with one of these companies if they offer them, because then we could rent immediately and then convert that into a purchase later, and that might also qualify for the bond, possibly, I don't know. But that might be a good way around the lead times. I don't know if there are companies that do that, but usually with industrial equipment like that, you can find one. Okay, so well, thank you for the answers so far. Let me have a look here if there's anything else. Okay, so it sounds like, in conclusion, your assessment is that it would be significantly more regulatory, of a regulatory burden to connect to the county. It would involve significantly higher expense and construction costs. It would be slower, and it would also provide a lower quality of incoming water because we would require the additional disinfecting solution. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say it would provide lower quality water, because I don't think that's a fair representation of it. It's just because the water could be good quality water. It's just coming through such a long pipe that you're going to have to just add a disinfection because that length of pipe, you could be picking up things along the way, and that's the process. But it has nothing to do necessarily with the quality per se, so I wouldn't say that. My personal biggest fear here is that trying to make a construction project of this scale so far out of your control. Now you're in roadways, you're in private properties, you're dealing with so many different agencies. And based on our experience for our Fowler Avenue experience, which was a far smaller construction project, I just have a very significant concern that whatever numbers we're looking at here will just blossom and be worse, and the time to take to do it could be much longer than we're anticipating. Could be an unfounded fear, but based on what we lived, we'd never expected the Fowler project to take as long and cost as much, and so it was a challenge.
I think it's a well-founded fear, but I don't think you're scared enough yet, because I think that the same thing you just said will equally apply to the city project. And if we look at the White Wave project that we did with ARPA money, we ended up going 1.8 million over on that one, on an $8 million volume. And so that's already a 20% overage, which, as I always say, is the bare minimum in construction. I think that if you're accounting for such issues with the county solution and not with the local solution, then you're selling short the risks. And I think that the local solution will likely also go 20% over. And I think that we should go into that with open eyes.
I don't disagree with you, council member. I agree, as I was mentioning, I keep mentioning over and over again, these are estimates, and you're correct. Once we drill down and we get whatever version we pursue, the costs will be more refined, and we'll see what they are. And with inflation in the construction industry, we all know that the numbers I've never seen a project go down. I mean, it's usually going up, and I'd like for that not to happen, but I agree with you. Even in the city project, it's likely to, with time to cost more than we originally anticipate. That is the nature of a lot of these projects. But I think the delta right now is still significant between the two. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I yield. Thank you.
Could you put the slide back up, one of the beginning slides that shows the zoomed out? You're getting close. Okay, go.
This one?
Yeah, that's good. So, actually, maybe the next one. No, I went too far. Never mind. Where did that one? That'll work.
This one?
So, does that blue line, is that the county's existing water pipe?
That's their 84-inch transmission line that runs along the bypass canal.
Okay, so on this diagram, you can see the pipe line pretty good, but you don't see the bypass canal on there. So it runs up the west side of the bypass canal the entire way?
Yes, for the majority of it, yes.
Where's it go?
The west. What's that?
Yeah, where's it going? Because it's New Tampa. So where's this pipe go? Or do you know? I mean, it might not be something you looked at.
So I have one other additional map, but it's a really wide area. So I have their main transmission, the county's main transmissions for this region, and it goes New Tampa area south of I-4. It travels farther south. So this is just the line that gets through that area.
Okay. Well, they must not have a distribution system off this line because we supply water east of this line currently.
Correct.
Okay. So I think I know the answer to this because you didn't say it, but I just want to clarify it. Who have we talked to, who haven't we talked to? Have we talked to Swift Mud about this at all?
Staff have not talked to SwimMud about this project, no.
Okay. Have we talked to DOT about this at all? This DOT's got several points of intersection. We've got Federal Highway going onto the interstate. We've got Fowler Avenue. We've got Fowler Avenue going underneath Warren Jack, and then we've also got the bridge that we're gonna. I mean, have we talked to them about this at all?
Not in depth as far as the actual path, because we still need to make the determination. There's the environmental side. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that go into where we're going to go. One of the pieces I will say about why it goes to the north before it comes south is to avoid the Fowler I-75 interchange. So in their drawing here, it shows it going straight to the west, which puts it basically through the heart of the interchange. And I will say, just from experience, we are not going to be able to jack and bore through the on-ramps, off-ramps, the interstate, and all of that at the same shot. So with the county having a parcel to the north, it seemed appropriate to get up there. It's a shorter distance through the wetland. It gets to a county parcel. It gets real close to I-75, but there's that one small piece that's privately owned. So that was an internal path that we felt was of the least resistance.
You know, there is an underpass on 127th up there. Is that where you're looking at going?
No, so it would be north of that. One of the challenges with that is the width, putting a 24-inch pipe in there, and the pillar structures that are under that bridge. So currently FDOT is doing an enhancement project on near I-75 near Harney Road, and there's been some concern with the pillar structures as far as where our water lines are. There's no negative impact, but while they're doing the expansion, our water lines are laying next to the pillars that they're trying to put new pillars in.
Okay.
So we just have, we have to be careful what we do under the bridge.
Okay. And I had several of the questions, but most of them have been answered by my colleagues' questions. But I have a couple more. If you'd go to the city solution spreadsheet, please. There we go. Okay. So one question, and I've asked this at least once before, I think probably more than once before, but I don't feel like the answer that we've gotten at least hasn't really cleared this up in my mind. I still don't understand the advantage of a $7 million exploratory well. I don't get it. If we're building a solution through nanofiltration that will purify or remove sufficiently the contaminants from our from our aquifer water that we're currently consuming today, we're already building this process. It's not gonna well, let's see if we can get better water and we don't have to build it. We're building it, there it is. What's the purpose of this $7 million exploratory well? So what if we reach better water? What does it save us? We're already building the filtration. So I must be missing something, because I don't understand why we're in search of better water if we're building a system to make our water better.
So there's two reasons for this exploratory well. So one of those is the exploratory well is the pilot basically for the deep well if the well proves not to be good. So go down the exploratory well as if you're drilling for a better water source. It proves to not be good. The contaminants are stronger in there. There's a byproduct that comes out of there. Then you retract out of that, you widen the casing, and then that's your deep well site. You've already created the pilot for that.
Okay.
The other piece is, in the CHA report, we were converting, the recommended was to convert Sunningdale into just a pumping station. The two largest wells the city currently has are feeding Sunningdale. So in this process, we need an additional well for capacity for the Whiteway plant. So if the exploratory well goes good, and with the current modeling that SwiftMud has, with the way they're able to track the aquifers now is a lot better than before. It should not be a swing and a miss. There should be good data that says we'll hit water, whether it's good or not. We should hit some water that would equal the capacity that we need to offset what we're currently pumping from Sunningdale.
Okay, but we could do that with a well that goes to the aquifer like we have now.
Sure. The other piece about the $7 million exploratory well is there's a strong potential that is grant funded through the Water Sources grant. So that $7 million is a number that may be there or may not be there, but it's part of the permitting process we're going to have to go through regardless. Once the master plan, if council accepts the master plan as it's written, we will need to do this exploratory well for the permitting process to do the rest of the work we needed to do.
Say that again.
In order for the permits, so when we apply for the permits to do all the work that's in the master plan, the exploratory well is a requirement for the permits. We have to show that we tried to get to better water. So we're going to need to do that well, the exploratory well.
That's something that I have not heard before. So the exploratory well is required in order to get the permits to do this project?
It's part of the process, yes.
Okay, because I do remember hearing the thing, well, we'll do the exploratory well, and if we don't get good water, we'll just back out and use this for the deep injection well. Well, I don't like that. I mean, I don't think I like it unless I'm missing something. For a couple of reasons. One is, I don't understand why, until you just said what you said, I don't understand why we're doing it to begin with. So, why do we just build, we need the deep injection well, just get a permit and drill that. We know we need it. This is just going to take us longer if we've got a permitted well to go down for fresh water for exploratory purposes, and then we want to change the permit to make it a deeper injection well. We're just building in delays. We know we need an injection well. Why don't we just get a permit to build the injection well, which is already going to take forever? I don't see why we would be building in delays like that. I don't understand still. You said something that I didn't know, that it's required. Well, if it's required, that ends the conversation. I don't understand why it's required, because I know it's circular here, but I still don't have a satisfactory answer as to, we're building a system to make the water that we have even better. And yet we have to spend $7 million of taxpayer money to go over here and drill this well. For what? And could the water be better? Yeah, it might, but we're not going to scrap the PFAS filters just because, I mean, I don't understand, we're being required to spend taxpayer money on this for something that doesn't do anything for us. I don't get that.
So one other thing to say about the additional well is, keep in mind, the effluent from the nano is roughly going to be a million gallons in 24 hours. So we're going to lose our capacity of what we're drawing in because of how we're going to clean it, and then we have to mix it and send it out.
Yeah, we need a lot more water.
We need more water. Correct.
Okay. So this well will be where we'll get the more water.
Not only that, but if we convert Sunningdale into a pumping station, we lose the capacity we have in the wells down there. So we don't have a means right now to pump the raw water from Sunningdale to Whiteway.
Okay,
That's a different permitting and process and dedicated line to do that.
okay. Well, I can't say I'm happy, but you've made me feel better. Thank you. Okay. Mr. B, I don't see any way in the world that we're going to meet this EPA deadline. And I mean, this isn't just our issue. This is 7,000 water systems across the country that have the same deadline. As far as I can tell, we're further along than many of them in terms of getting the ball going on this. But if it were just a matter of getting this bond and buying the equipment, doing this project, we could probably make it. But with the permitting stuff that we don't have any control over, I don't see how in the world we're going to make this. So what steps, if any, and you and I have had some offline conversations about this, but what steps, if any, can or should we be doing now to kind of lay the groundwork in anticipation of, look, we're going to work as feverishly as we can on this, but we don't control SwiftMud, and we don't control EPC and DEP permits and DOH, and I mean, there's a lot of initials that have to sign off on whichever way we go. Some are worse than others, but I mean, we've heard somebody at the last meeting we had at Lightfoot told us it would take at least a year just to get the deep injection well permit. So what do we need to be doing to let Washington know that, and then there was one of our residents that came up that actually pointed out something really, she goes, so you're going to have to show compliance by 2031, but those tests are actually going to have to occur before that.
Correct. So, and as council is aware, every opportunity that I have where I interact with any member of the congressional delegation or their staff over the last couple of years, I have brought this up to them. Specifically asking will the federal government provide us, first of all, with funds, because this right now is an unfunded mandate. I mean, it's a clear example of an unfunded mandate that is a significant burden on local communities. Now, mind you, these are not taxpayer dollars, these are utility customer dollars, but still it's an impact on our residents, particularly in our business owners, business property owners. So that conversation, as far as I know, there is no money in the budget, in the federal budget, to do that, to offset these costs. So the alternative to that conversation usually goes to, well, is there a way to provide some additional flexibility? Because as we illustrate here in all the work that's been done so far, we're not shying away from this project. We're not ignoring it. We are moving steadfastly towards doing it. And by 2029, if assuming council gives us the green light in the next, some direction today, and then obviously when we get the budget approved to pursue this, as Jason said, we really don't have any time to lose. We need to go. And we're going to be making every effort and expending a lot of time and resources to do that. So by 2029, I think we can make a very clear argument to anybody who's coming in from the outside to say, what have you done? I think we can show what we're doing and the progress we're making. Whether we meet that deadline or not, it's going to be very, very close. And as Councilmember Kravitz noted, construction projects are inherently complicated and will have delays and things like that. So that's what I've been stressing to the federal staffers. The district director for Laura Lee's office last year, I said that to him. Just had a meeting this past week with a representative from Senator Moody's office. I think the council as a whole, we may want to have some correspondence sent to these delegations, just to again say, look, we're working towards this, but any consideration for some flexibility, if for some reason we are not able to meet those deadlines. We're not going to be alone. As the mayor noted, there are 7,000 drinking water systems in the same situation as us. I'm sure some may be more ahead of us, but I'm sure there are many that are further behind than we are, because if you're looking at these significant costs, so and just the complications of putting a project like this together, the scope of it. So that's where I think we need to spend some time making sure that they're aware of that. And in the meantime, whatever direction you give us, we will move as quickly as we can.
Okay. So we have some more presenters.
Yes, so we have Mr. Napoli.
Some more questions.
Nope.
in this section.
Okay.
Okay, so one, I do want to comment, just for anybody who's watching, that there's basically two components to this project, and one is that our water treatment plant is 40 years old. It has reached the end of its natural life and requires investment. No matter what, we will need to invest in some capacity for this project. The PFAS is a different addition to it, but the investment would be required no matter what. But now we're looking at an investment in water treatment and water distribution that encompasses PFAS and maybe some future chemicals that are discovered down the road. So two questions. With regard to the temporary, it seems like if we put a temporary system in place, even though we wouldn't be completed with a final project before 2031 or 2032, we would be meeting the deadline in fact, because we would have a temporary measure in place before the deadline is there. Would that be true?
Yes, right. It would be true. It would be true. It would be a much more significant financial impact on the operating rate for the fund, as Mr. Napoli will illustrate. But yes, in theory, if you did the temporary solution and we could manage to go through the permitting, get it in 2029, when the initial deadline, it should be reducing PFAS to the level below the 4 parts per trillion. That would be the hope in terms of the expenditure you'd be looking to make for it. Okay,
and then as far as the temporary components, if we were to purchase them, I know some of it would be actually maybe infrastructure improvements, but are there any elements of a temporary solution that we would be able to sell when they're no longer part of our system?
I'm sorry, that question was asked earlier and I forgot to answer it. I apologize. So thank you for following up. So we haven't specifically looked into that, but I would imagine that there's probably a marketplace for some of that equipment. So yes, if it's available and there's a market for it, we would look to do that, if that's the direction the council wants us to pursue.
Okay, but it would be, there are elements of it that are, can be separated from an infrastructure improvement, and we could potentially sell them.
The canister components, the skid-mounted units would be the only piece. The rest of it would be the part of the city's infrastructure. The piping and the pumps piece, they would remain.
Okay, all right. And then I know we're going to talk about funding, but my biggest concern with the project investing in the city's infrastructure has to do with the deep injection well and just the sheer cost of that and the speed at which technology is improving. And we don't, obviously that's not necessarily anything you can answer now, but that is probably my biggest concern with the Temple Terrace investment option.
It's I believe, a well-founded concern. In fact, going back to the point about reaching out to the congressional delegation, one of the conversations that I've had, the lines of conversation has been, if we could have more time to address this, there are emerging technologies that are coming, but they're not tested at a scale yet that would be reliable enough for us to say, okay, we're going to go with this technology. It could be a technology that's been tested on a pilot or a bench testing scenario, not a $5 million to $9 million gallon, 5 million gallon to plant per day. So again, if there was some more time here, you could have the luxury of considering that. Right now, we just don't have that time. So right now, the analysis has been done, I think, looking at sort of the tried and true solutions that have had experience in the water treatment marketplace for years, if not decades at this point. And that's the recommendation that came through that would work for us. And the nano piece, as you alluded to, council member, it not just addresses PFAS. We feel of all the media that we're looking at, of all the filtration systems, this one also allows us to address some of the other contaminants, because the EPA is going through, they're issuing another UCMR. If you remember UCMR, that's their, every 5 years they'll go out and they want us to test for certain contaminants. So they're going to issue another UCMR for different contaminants, and whether it becomes a new rule or not is still much too early to say. But it could, because that's the whole purpose of those UCMR. And so the nano, based on all the science and the input we've gotten, will address a lot of that, if not most of that or all of that in the near future. What we know so far. Now, there could be some other thing 20 years from now we're not aware of. But so we feel that if the investment's made, if this was the direction council wants us to go, it's going to be a sound investment that will be able to address those future regulatory changes, at least for the foreseeable decades.
All right, thank you. That's it.
Councilmember Kravitz.
Just a few follow-up questions. So have you reached out to any companies that offer the temporary filtering solution either for sale or for rent?
Yes. Yes. Will has been working with the vendor that was one of the reference points from CHA.
Okay, good. Do you know when we can expect to get numbers from them or an official estimate?
So we have those.
Oh, okay. So those are actually from a bid,
Not from a bid, no.
from an estimate.
Yes, from contact, basically phone calls with the vendor, getting an estimate, a verbal estimate at this point. We didn't bid it, we didn't do any sort of, at this point, it's just mere estimation.
Verbal estimate, okay. As Ecclesiastes said, the spoken word is like the wind, so hopefully they stand by that. All right, so if we get this company engaged, what is the likelihood that we can meet the April 2029 deadline? I would imagine high.
For the short-term solution? Yeah, well, it would take about a year to permit, and based upon our estimation, so let's say we moved as quickly as we could, by fiscal 28, we should have the solution in place.
Okay.
And then when 29 hits and the EPA, that's the deadline for the EPA compliance, unless you were able to meet some of its conditions to get an extension, again, with this level of investment, in theory, the water should be performing at below 4 parts per trillion.
So here's where I'm at right now. I think we should move forward with the temporary solution. I think that that's ready to go. When it comes to the other two options, county versus city, I would like to see an apples to apples comparison with those timeline, cost, budget impact for 2027, because I think right now we're kind of conflating the budget discussion with the water treatment discussion. And I'd like to see them disambiguated a little bit. I think I know enough now to make a decision about the temporary solution, but I think that since I've only been looking at these things for, 2 hours? No, 1 hour and 20 minutes now, I think that there's still some information that needs to be provided about the city versus county connection. I think some of those numbers are a little bit unrefined, and I think that from what I've heard, there's really no argument to go with the county. And I'd like to see some support for that other than just numbers in a spreadsheet. So if it would be possible to maybe like package the discussions that have been had with the county so that we just have a little bit more support to see where all of these demands come from, or maybe there's some information out there that we can get on the different permits that are required. Right now it's just two numbers. And for the city solution also, I think that we need to nail that down a little bit better. Those numbers are also pretty malleable, and I remember at the last bond workshop, we were all pretty much discussing it as an open secret that the numbers that CHA provided were too low now, that they had not been adjusted for inflation, because if I can just remind everyone, the CHA report was ordered in July of 2025, right? But it was delivered in May 2026, so those numbers are already quite old, so they're probably 2025 numbers. And we're in end of 2026 now, so it's been 2 years with inflation intervening. And we ran those numbers at the bond workshop, and I said, even if we just go with the typical inflation of 3% per year, you're already looking at 5% more, roughly 5 to 6% more. So I think that we really just need, when we move forward with the temporary solution, that's when the time pressure is relieved. And when the time pressure is relieved because we have the temporary solution, then we can nail down the numbers for the other two solutions, and then we can do a good job capturing all of the different offers, all of the different requirements, and then we can make a decision. So is there any objection to that process on the side of staff, I'm wondering?
It's really not, if you're asking specifically about the temporary solution.
Well, and the other half of the question, yeah.
Well, the other part of the question, I'm not sure what additional information in terms of the county and the city contrast you're seeking. We have the numbers that were provided by the county. We have the additional costs that we had to contemplate in terms of some of the detail the county did not provide, like the jack and bore work and hanging aerial structures over the waterways. So I don't know exactly what other information you'd want from the county to compare the two.
Sure. Okay. So let me just give one example. The current number that we have in the spreadsheet is from a verbal estimate given by a company that provides the temporary filtering solution. I would like to see a written estimate, because every time that we've sat down here, the numbers have been different. I don't think I've ever seen the same numbers twice. And so I have very, very low level of belief in the numbers at any given time. I cannot emphasize it enough. The same numbers have never appeared twice in a given meeting. Every single meeting we've been in, the numbers have been different. So I'm not in a position right now to say that I really believe any of the numbers. And that's why I think that we might be creating a sense of urgency that's relatively new, because we've been talking about this, as I said, since 2025, and it moved really slowly at first, right? Even though, certain people were pushing, it didn't really move ahead with a lot of pressure, and now it is, which is good. I think it's excellent that it is moving ahead with such pressure. But when you start to act in a way that is driven by urgency, the risk of a mistake is higher, which is why my strong urge is get the temporary solution, take the pressure off, and then actually go through the numbers properly. And then when we've had two meetings where we have the same numbers twice, then we can probably think, okay, this is probably what we're really looking at. And then we can make a decision and know that we're not just cobbling something together that won't actually stand up once we start doing it. And if we go down a route where we're suddenly surprised by all of the outcomes that we're getting. We run into problems, the numbers are different, the people that we thought were going to deliver us certain solutions don't follow through because it was only a verbal estimate, right? That kind of thing will be very frustrating. And so I'm just trying to get ahead of that. So that's why I'm saying, let's please go ahead with the temporary solution and let's get people good water right now as quickly as we can. And then when we move forward with the final, the ultimate solution that we embrace, then we'll know that it's on solid ground. That's my preference right now. And again, that's my position. So other people can have theirs. Thank you very much. I yield.
Okay, well, we're not at the discussion phase yet. We're way ahead of ourselves in the meeting. We still have presentations to be had. So can we move on with the presentations and then we'll
Sure.
branch into discussion at the appropriate time?
Sure. If I could ask Mr. Napoli to come on up to the podium and run through his.
Morning.
Morning. Does this microphone work? Yes. You guys can hear me? Well, you can hear me regardless of the microphone. Good morning, Mayor, council members, Peter Napoli, Stantec Consulting. Let me figure out how to switch over the presentation here. I don't know where it is.
It's on the desktop.
Okay. Or I said, there it was. Yeah. You are that one. Yep. All right. And okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I was here several months ago to deliver some financial sustainability and rate forecasting results in coordination with the plant rehab scenarios. So today I have an update. Put together some scenarios in collaboration with staff and based on the scenarios that were presented earlier with either the county connection or the city plant rehab. Just to review some of the high-level assumptions here that go into all of these scenario slides. We have your 2027 budgeted as it currently stands, revenues and expenses from finance. We have escalation factors built in just for your operating expenditures that are outside of all these different scenarios, just understanding your salaries and operating supplies, repair and maintenance, all those things go up. We have the two main assumptions as far as the debt issuance, either for the city water plant rehab of $73 million, so debt financing that $73 million, or debt financing the $93 million with the county connection. We have the numbers as provided by the financial advisor with the amortization schedules, and both those scenarios include 3 years interest only to offset the burden on ratepayers as much as possible. And then in both scenarios, we're also assuming first year interim financing. So that would be in 2027, the city would use a line of credit essentially to finance the first portion of the costs in both of those plans. As things change and in order to react to how things change, it would only be about $650,000 in interest in order to finance that about $12 million, which would be the first year cost in that scenario or the capital plan scenario. And then we also have the temporary solutions baked in. And then in all these scenarios, we're targeting 2.0 coverage. So what that means is your operating net income, so the utilities rate revenues minus the utilities operating expenses over the debt service amount as provided to the financial advisor. You want it to be 2 times that for strong ratings and ratings purposes in the market. So we'll move into the first scenario I have here. And this screenshot here is from our model. I condensed it to 5 years because really all of the planning is a 5-year outlook. The urgency of what's going on in the city is better represented in the 5-year time frame. So in this current scenario here, we have the rate plan shown in that first row. Your most recent rate increase for water and sewer rates was 5%. And programmed into 2027 is a 15% increase, and then every year after that is 5%. This reflects the city solution, so the $73 million of debt issued in 2028 and the line of credit used in 2027. The impact to the average residential user based on 4,000 gallons is $11 a month. So you can see that on the for the 2027 impact with the 15% increase. The fund balance represented in the bottom left-hand graph is more than healthy over that 5-year time frame, but really where the rate pressure is coming from is in the middle part of this chart here. You'll see senior lien debt service coverage. That's that coverage ratio I was talking about with the net operating income over the debt service requirement. And you'll see that by the 5th year, it gets a little tight at the 2.0, but it's not an area for concern. So that 15% provides adequate coverage over the 5-year time frame and adequate fund balance exceeding your minimum reserve target of 3 months. And then next I have the pro forma that reflects that previous page. So this is a little harder to read and more detailed, but basically from the top we start with your beginning fund balance. We layer in the rate revenues, so you could see rate revenue and other revenue to get to the total utility operating revenue. We subtract out the personnel costs, the operating costs to get to a net income available for debt service. Then the debt service coverage calculation is shown in that next section there, so you can see the 3 years of interest only under this plan of issuing debt for $73 million for the city solution. It starts with a $2.6 million payment there in 2028, increases to 3.5 for 29 and 2030, and then the final, and this would be the average payment going forward, principal and interest is $4.8 million on the $73 million of debt. And then you can see the interim financing cost in that first year in 2027, and then that of course gets wrapped up into the debt issuance and paid off. And then down at the bottom, there's the other below-the-line expenses like the transfer to the R&R fund to continue to fund R&R projects in the city, and then other cash-funded capital that's outside of this whole plan, just utility capital that's in the current CIP. This next scenario here is where we layered in the temporary solution, and the temporary solution scenario that we used was the buying scenario, so we don't have the rental costs built in. We have the purchase of the asset wrapped up into the borrowing. We didn't change the numbers for the borrowing, but it's a nominal cost to include that and wrap it up into the issuance. We do have the increase in operational costs, the $5.2 million a year for 2028 and 2029. And under this scenario, we'd have to increase rates 35% in 2027 in order to provide adequate debt service coverage, really over those 2 years of temporary solution costs. This scenario is a little weird right now because you can see the fund balance is more than healthy, but the way we're recognizing the immediate change-out cost is an operational cost. So that's factored into that debt service coverage from a rating agency standpoint. The only thing that I can think to help reduce pressure is if there was some way to allocate fund balance directly for that and make it a below-the-line expense. That way it didn't get included in coverage, but the most conservative assumption right now is to include it as an operational expense, because with the $5.2 million, there's no asset or capital item attached to it. It is truly an operational type expense. So the 35% would provide adequate coverage for the 5 years, and actually in those last 2 years, we still have 5% increases, but those probably actually wouldn't be necessary. So you'd need the 35, the 5, and then you wouldn't need those increases after that in order to maintain debt service coverage. And it's just shown here in the pro forma. You can see highlighted in the yellow there, it's that additional $5.2 million that comes into the operational expenses in both of those years, puts a lot of pressure on from a coverage standpoint for the operating income. This next scenario contemplates the county connection option. So instead of, really the only difference here, we're backing out the temporary solution, so no temporary solution in this scenario, and we're just issuing $93 million of debt instead of $73 million of debt to show the difference of the debt service payment and the rating and the pressure on the rate increases. So under this, we'd still recommend a 15% for next year, followed by a 10% and then 7% running after that in order to maintain that debt service coverage ratio. This is just because for $93 million of debt, it's a higher debt payment. When you go to the pro forma, the ultimate debt payment principal plus interest is $6.1 million rather than the $4.8 million under the city solution scenario. And then again, this is before we layer in the temporary solution. I didn't actually run that scenario. So with the temporary solution, it would only increase the pressure on the rate, probably to the same, extent that it did on the city solution side. So you'd probably see the 35% in 2027, but still the need to be followed by a 10% and then 7% after. Back to the city manager's point, at this time I didn't have the data on the potential cost of water purchases in the 5th or 6th year. So if that was an additional cost of about $5 million, just for reference, about 1% rate increase gets the city about $250,000 increase in revenue. So you'd be looking at about a 20% increase in the rates at that 5th or 6th year in order to absorb the cost of water purchases. And then this final scenario we prepared is just back to the first scenario. So city solution, $73 million of debt, first year interim financing, and what it looks like if you just continued 5% rate increases instead of the 15% rate increase we're recommending. And you can see highlighted in the colors there the pressure on the debt service coverage. The fund balance looks fine, but really where that rate pressure is coming from is the adequate revenue generated to provide coverage over the 5-year time frame. And then finally, we have a rate survey here. Your current rates are on the left. This is the current average bill based on 4,000 gallons of usage for water and sewer rates. Temple Terrace's your 2026 rates are represented there on the left, and then on the right is a 15% increase next year. You're still below the average for the surveyed entities, and this also would assume that none of them would increase their rates next year. So if there are a lot of rate increases in the region, it's pretty common for utilities to at least adopt an inflationary increase year over year. So more than likely you will be further to the left-hand side, to the smaller side of this survey when we look at it again in 2027, even with the 15% increase. So the findings, considerations, recommendations, if the city were to contemplate or go forward, proceed with the city solution scenario, the line of credit in 2027 is recommended, bond issuance in 2028, and along with that a 15% increase in next year's rates followed by 5% increases. And that kind of plan would support the bond issuance. The FAA and the rating agencies would be looking for that 5-year plan and the commitment to rate increases to generate the sufficient revenue needed to cover the debt. The residential bills, even with a 15% rate increase, continue to be favorable with the local surveyed entities and still below average. And then we'd recommend the city continue to reevaluate the annual sufficiency of revenues from the utility standpoint. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Napoli. Are there questions for Mr. Napoli? Councilmember Schister?
Can we switch back? Can we switch back to the your presentation, Mr. Bay?
You might have to do it over on your end.
I think I can find it.
Oh, you got it over there. Okay. The very first, one of the first slides. That one. Okay, now this is the city solution. Can we go back to the county solution? Okay, all right. That answers my question. It was I wanted to make sure we were talking the same numbers all the way through. Okay. Wow, big numbers. Okay. No, I'm good. I'm good. I want to clear. I couldn't remember that number off the one sheet. No, I'm good for right now.
Mr. Napoli?
Hi, thank you for the analysis there. I appreciate it. It looks pretty good. I do have one question about the 2026 rate increase. Is that, is there a reason why you went with 5%, or is that just a placeholder, more or less?
The 2026, your current rates?
Yeah.
That was a 5% increase from
Okay.
2025.
Got it, okay. And can you circulate this to city council?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I appreciate that. And last question. How come there's no temporary solution? Sorry, let me rephrase that. There was no temporary solution in the county one, but there was in the city variant that you showed?
I can run that scenario.
It's fine. I think depending on how the investigation shakes out in terms of actually nailing down these numbers in a more reliable way, it does look like the county solution is going to be significantly more expensive. And if that is the scenario, I don't really see any reason why we would go with that if the water quality is equivalent. So we're going to go with the cheaper of the two solutions that gives us the best possible water. So I don't know if your effort in that would be well invested, but I was just making sure that I understood that correctly. And that's it. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Vice Mayor? Councilmember Fernandez?
Yes, so question for you about the rates, including a build-in for future investment. So the question has come up repeatedly about why Temple Terrace didn't establish a renewal replacement fund sufficient to fund, and this is not anything to do with the PFAS remediation, just simply renewal and replacement for the water treatment plant at the end of its natural life. So can you speak a little bit to the process of what ethically the city can charge current utility customers for potential future investment and what best practices are?
Take that one. Sit here.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're getting into, I was hoping for questions for Mr. Napoli, but, okay.
It will be, but.
Good morning, council, mayor. As you know, that question has a lot to do with past history. For the last several years, we have been increasing at 5% a year, which has been adequate to fund the projects that Mr. Warrenfeldt has identified. What Mr. Napoli has done is used, if you remember, he said there's a component we've broken out in this scenario where we're looking at the cost for the water treatment plant upgrade, which we would have done anyways, regardless of the PFAS situation. We tied those in to the PFAS remediation. So we have that built into these numbers. There's also other capital improvement costs, which Mr. Warrenfeldt has identified in our 5-year CIP, that projects that will need to be done outside of the water system upgrade PFAS remediation. So we are cognizant of that. We're trying to get online with that. Other than that, I could talk about the past, but I don't think that's relevant at this point.
So what I would like to know as part of your consideration in the rate analysis, one, would the 2027 fiscal year, if we go with the temporary solution, regardless of county connection or city investment, that connection is consistent, or that temporary solution is consistent for either one. would the 35% basically be the required rate increase in that 1 year, or would that be able to be spread across multiple years? And does your rate increase analysis include not just the ordinary maintenance and some capital improvements, but also the ongoing process of renewal and replacement to help maybe in the future not have to have a full turnover of the plant to this extent, but consistent maintenance? We know that these components have a lifespan, but what I want to know is, do these proposed rate increases also consider the end of the 40-year useful life of whatever investment we make here?
Let me start with the first question, if I can. With the temporary solution, I believe you were asking if it was consistent across both scenarios, and if I'm sorry, or the 35%, if it could be phased in. Actually, I think that there is potential to perhaps phase that in, break it out over at least 2 years, maybe 3 years. I just didn't run that scenario in addition to I didn't want to over scenario the council. So I can run that scenario and look at it and see if maybe there can be a smaller increase up front just in 2027, and then maybe you can have higher increases in 28 and 29 instead of the 5%, instead of having that huge 35% increase all at once. Again, and then there's still more investigation into the temporary solution. If there somehow we can assign it as a below the line expense, because right now it's just pressuring the debt service coverage. The projected fund balance is sufficient to just allocate funds towards that. So if there's some way we can kind of treat it as a different type of operational expense, so the rating agencies don't lump it into the other operating expenses, and for coverage purposes, there might be a way to offset that 35% even more. So this is worst case scenario right now. I know that you need to make a decision on your 27 rates soon, so I can run those scenarios and get back to the city on potentially phasing it out, and then talk more with the FAs about how we can maybe code that expense differently and to reduce rate pressure.
Okay, and then in your analysis consideration, are you just using for fund balance and the capital projects that might be ordinary annual maintenance?
Just the plan that was provided to me.
Okay.
So the utilities department has a 5-year CIP that, and we just plug that into the model. So it includes R&R, and I'm sure they can talk about it further, but it includes R&R and then some other projects that have been identified as needs outside of the plant rehab.
Okay.
So, to address your question, Councilmember, I think we don't have I think what you're looking for is a sort of a dedicated line item that would go towards like renewal and replacement.
Microphone.
Looks, it says it's on. So we don't have a dedicated line item. In essence, it says this is for renewal and replacement, and this every year there's going to be a certain allocation of funds that go towards that. We don't necessarily do it that way. What Mr. Ingram alluded to is historically, I think the capital program for the water fund was very ambitious, and then at the same time, once you realize you couldn't get to everything, and so things would just they would be like a convoy, and the convoy just kept getting longer and longer and longer. I think what Mr. Warrenfeldt has done with his leadership is cull this out. Let's focus on the critical projects to make the system work. You can tell for the next 5 years, based on this pro forma, that the vast majority of our work is going to be because of the water plant. Was it based on deferred maintenance or just end of life? Naturally, at this point, it's kind of irrelevant. We have to address it. I think what we can affirm to you is that with us being here in the team, is that we're going to bring to you a maintenance plan that makes sense and not just automatically defer things just because we don't think the council will want to consider it. We're going to bring you a plan. If it makes sense to bring you the plan, we're going to bring you that plan so that we can keep up with a regular maintenance schedule going forward in the out years, so that we can get another 40 years of life from this improvement that we're contemplating here.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor,
No questions.
other questions for Mr. Napoli? Is there another presentation, or?
No, sir. We just had the financial advisor is here just in case you had specific questions that were beyond what we could answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Napoli.
Thank you.
So council, as I believe obviously we can't take official action here. It's more in terms of guidance for the staff, but hopefully we can reach some consensus. There's 3 decision points before us this morning. One is, the first one probably should be, although that's up to you guys, but the logical order in my mind is, do we pursue the county fix or the local fix? Do we include temporary mitigation, the temporary granulated activated charcoal solution, or not? And then, of course, at the end of this, what rate guidance we want to give Mr. Ingram in order to create a budget for our consideration. And so those are really the 3 decision points, and might as well start down at this end this time. Yep, Vice Mayor?
Thank you. All right, so for the first issue, a statement was made, a question was asked of staff, I think by the mayor, that what can we do to speed this process up? So the first thing we need to do is put to bed the issue between the county and the city thing. And I know the questions were asked. So an example, Councilmember Kravitz asked some very good questions about funding for the county option. If we go with the city option, those don't need to be answered. You made a question about deep injection well or the temporary well or exploratory well. If we go with the county option, we don't need to deal with that. So,
Yes, we do. I'm sorry, yes.
okay, so I have not seen or heard anything today that would make me think that I would pursue the county option. It's me personally. So everybody, when the county or the city of Tampa option was floated a year ago or whenever all this started, it was from people that would think that it was a much quicker, cheaper, and easier process just to flip a switch and a valve to have the water come to us. That's not the case. So we've got a county option is going to be as long or longer, cost more, and certainly by monthly, what I've seen, the monthly rates would be more expensive to our residents to buy the water down the road. So I'm comfortable making that decision right now to recommend that we scrap the county option. That's just a comment. And that's all, just on the first of the 3 things that you talked about.
Councilmember Fernandez?
I'm going to agree that it does seem like, based on these numbers and the presentation, that it's a better investment for the utility customer for us to renew and replace and invest in the Temple Terrace choice. I agree that I think that people did get the message from an original presentation that to connect to an outside entity was a simple, just connect a pipe and we're done, and it's just the cost of the pipe. But it's not. It's a lot more expensive, and it's also a big concern for me to be buying from Tampa Bay Water. That cost can go up and up and up. So it's not just the cost, the very high cost of connection, the very complicated process of connection, but also the higher cost of ordinary water usage to the end customer. It's going to be a lot more expensive to the Temple Terrace resident or utility customer, Temple Terrace utility customer.
Councilmember Schuster?
On the first decision point, I shudder to try to deal with the county and all the other regulatory agencies that are going to come into play. I, too, would like to see us move forward with the city option, rebuilding what we've got, interim mitigation issues, projects to do the best we can with what we've got to work with. But I think that what we think may take 5 years could take 8, 9 years. It's going to be legal questions, legal issues, unbelievable that we can't even contemplate at this point. I don't know what's on the screen. We got Brian. I don't know if this is being recorded at all. Anyway, I too agree. We need to go with go with the city. It is, again, I know people who said all we got to do is just hook in and tie into what they've got. Well, that doesn't exist. It's 3.2 miles is an awful long distance to try to cover, as well as all the different issues in the interim. So I want to see us go with that. Go with the internal city fix.
Councilmember Kravitz?
I just, you walk down memory lane, October 24th is when, last year is when we got the estimates for what it would be to connect to the city of Tampa or to the county, and those came in at 20 to 39 million or 25 to 35.8 million respectively. And so now we're getting numbers that are 3 times that. So that's obviously a big shift. But I think a lot of people's understanding of the situation was based on those numbers that were circulated in writing to all of us. And as we've gone down that path and tried to look into what it would really cost, I think it's been clear that it's going to be significantly more expensive, even though, as I've said, I'm not fully satisfied with the numbers as they've been put to us. And the other thing to point out, we're talking about it as being a city option versus a county option. Even the county option, though, has a significant city component. We are operating infrastructure, building infrastructure to connect, building treatment plants, and so forth. So whatever route we go, we're really only making a decision about where we source our water. Are we sourcing the water from the county, or are we sourcing it from a local well? But in either case, we will have significant infrastructure that we are still operating. We will still have our own municipal water staff. None of that changes in either of those 2 scenarios. So my main concern today, and this is a workshop, so we're not going to be making any final decisions today. That will be for a council meeting where the public will have a chance to come in if they wish to, and where it will be noticed and advertised and so on as being a meeting where we make decisions. This is just a discussion. So my contribution to the discussion is that I'd really like to see the temporary solution come as quickly as possible. I think decisions made under high pressure are bad. I don't think there's any need to decide today between the city and the county option, although as I've said before in this meeting, it certainly doesn't seem like there's any reason to pursue the county option. But if we have the temporary solution in place, then we can take our time with what route we ultimately go. The temporary solution will give us good, high-quality water. In the meanwhile, it'll bring us in compliance with the EPA deadline. We won't need to apply for an extension. That is one of the main goals that I have, is that we should not use the extension. I will vote no against an extension. I'm happy to go on record with that right now. We have several years to get the temporary solution in place, and we should do that. So that's my current thinking about this, and I think that we should definitely shop around the temporary solution if we can. And I know I've said that we should act on it quickly, but if there are other providers that can give us estimates for this temporary solution on relatively short notice, then I'd like to see them. I think we should be reaching out to as many providers of these filtering solutions as we can. Not only one, although I do think it's wonderful that we have gotten at least a verbal comment back from one. That's very encouraging. I'd like to see that converted into a written bid that we can then seriously discuss, ideally with at least 1 or 2 other bids from other providers that are also in writing, so that we can compare side by side which one is going to suit us best. And I don't care particularly whether we rent or we buy. My only concern between rent and buy is that we should go with the option that costs us the least and is the most suitable for our needs. So those are my thoughts right now. That's what I got.
Well, going back to the question number 1 about the county or the local fix, I agree with the majority of my colleagues that we should, I thank you for looking into the county solution, but I don't see a scenario where that's going to be viable. I agree that there are cost overruns in every construction project. The rare exception is the building that we're going to go cut the ribbon on in an hour. I think that one came in like ahead of time and on budget, which is like really unusual. But there will be cost overruns either way we go. But I think the cost overruns, the opportunity for cost overruns for the county proposal are significantly more, because there's just more inflection point. I mean, there's more agencies involved. There's just more opportunity for overruns and hitting gas lines and fiber and God knows what else underground. So I do think it was our duty to the ratepayer to investigate these things. I think that was something that we needed to do. I think people deserved an answer to that, but I think we've explored it. I'm not interested personally in having you go back and try to refine these numbers. I mean, this is a hypothetical, and I don't want you chasing, I mean, we know that this is more expensive than the local option, so I'm in favor of going with the local option. Now, the temporary mitigation, we've already heard from Councilmember Kravitz.
I think we need to go with the temporary mitigation. I prefer to buy it as opposed to renting it, assuming, the financing is still applied that way.
Can you remind us, before we get too deep into this, what was the cost? Is $5 million roughly to buy it, and then $5 million a year for what, the 3 or 4 years that we'll have it?
Based upon the numbers we have from the one particular vendor is, if you wanted to purchase it, if you wanted to rent it, it was 2.64 million a year to rent it. If you wanted to buy the equipment, it was 5.5 million is the number that we were given. If you wanted it, not if you want, then as part of that, the replacement of the granulated active carbon media, the reactivation of that media. As I mentioned, typically when the vendor actually approached or talked to us, they were assuming we would do it every 6 months. That's probably more of a standard. And for us, we had to do it basically every 45 days based on our pilot testing experience. So that is estimated at $750,000 each time you do it. And so that added up to $5.25 million a year to reactivate the media on top of the cost.
Okay, so in rough numbers, it's $5 million to buy it and $5 million for probably 4 years. So it's roughly $25 million.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Gil, I don't know if you were.
I say we buy it if we can.
Vice Mayor?
Sure. And a question real quick before that. So the difference between, you said, in renting and buying, the buying, we can purchase it with the bond, incorporate that into the bond, correct? How would we do it if we rented? Would it be regular financing, or how would that work? Do we know? Hey, somebody, all right, I knew that.
Good morning.
Morning, Jeremy Needfelt. I'm a partner with PFM, Jay Glover, head of conflicts. So thank you for the question. I was hoping to get a chance to speak. The option for a lease purchase is right on point, just like you have that potential for a fire truck or an ambulance or a crane or something like that. So equipment finance is an option if you purchase it. If you rent it, that's seen as an operating expense, so that would flow through your coverage as part of your operating expense.
Okay,
So it couldn't be capitalized as part of a bond transaction. A lease financing would look the same to the city as a bond financing. It would just be a separate structure with a bank typically, as opposed to the public market.
okay, all right, so incorporated into the rate structure anyway, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so my opinion is that yes for the temporary solution and to purchase.
Councilmember Fernandez.
I also agree with exploring the temporary solution and putting that in place as soon as possible. I definitely want you to look at the most cost-effective way to acquire the equipment, whether that's lease financing or, I mean, just I have my calculator, just simple math. At 2.6 million, if you estimate we need to have it in place for 4 years before we would have a permanent solution, that's 10.4 million to rent versus buying it. So that would, but I'm looking for you to do the most cost effective. It seems like if we were to buy it, and of course if you would come before us before anything was actually purchased, but I would, obviously want you to research what our options are in terms of the actual price to get the best price. But it seems like we could buy, even if we didn't roll it into our financing, it seems like this would be something that if we had the fund balance available, because it's equipment, it's capital equipment, we would be able to either finance through equipment financing or purchase out of our fund balance to be rolled into bond finance if that's the direction we went. So it seems to me lease to own or an outright purchase are probably going to be our most cost-effective scenarios. So that's what I would like to see. So that's it.
And Councilmember Kravitz, you spoke about this, but you were on the first question, so do you have any further points you'd like to make on this issue?
Yeah, thank you. I just have 2 points. First would be about the rate increase. I didn't address that yet.
Well, that's the next question.
Oh, is it? Well, in that case, I'll postpone that. But just sticking with the city versus county option,
That's the last question. We're on temporary mitigation.
Oh, I think I've said everything on that. Thank you.
Okay. I was enthusiastically supportive of looking into the temporary mitigation, and I'm not opposed to it. However, it came in a lot more expensive than I thought it would. I knew about the probably $5 or $6 million to buy the equipment. I had no idea that we'd have to change out these filters or renew them every 45 days for 4 years. This is somewhere in the vicinity of $25 million, which, along with everything else, is likely to be more than we expect. So, but let's just go with the $25 million. We have 7,800 water accounts. That's over $3,200 per water customer if we do this for 4 years. Now, that's a little, that number's a little because that's average. So you've got industrial customers and then you've got 2-bedroom homes. So there's a huge difference in the cost. But the average number would be $3,200, which probably actually wouldn't apply to any person. It would be like this. But that's a lot of money to add $25 or $30 million to this already expensive project that's already going to run over because they always do. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that despite the concerns and all the hype, Temple Terrace Water is in compliance with all federal and state regulations currently. Do we have PFAS problems? Yeah, I'd like to, I think in the end of the day, this is going to make our city's going to have better water. This is probably a good thing. We need to be doing some of this stuff anyway. But we're in compliance with all the regulations. In the cities that I talk to, now I haven't talked to 7,000 different mayors, so but in the people that I do talk to, I don't know of anybody who's currently in compliance who's spending $25 million on a temporary solution while they implement the permanent solution. I haven't talked to anybody like that. And some of these people have PFAS way worse than we do, and they're like, well, we're in compliance. Why would we do it? We're not doing that. So I'm not opposed to it if that's what the public wants, but that's a lot of money to add to this project when, yeah, we have PFAS that will be in excess of the legal limit in 5 years if we don't do something, but it's not in excess of the legal limit now. And if you are one of the residents that use this water and you're just like really, we've heard all kinds of people, I can't water the flowers, people are saying they can't take a shower. None of the science has ever told them that. I don't know where that's coming from. But if you're one of the people that are like really sensitive to this, for $100 you can go buy a Brita filter. I'm not saying you should have to. Our water's compliant. But when you compare the cost of a filter compared to adding $25 or $30 million to this bill, we'd be cheaper to buy everybody a filter. This is just, anyway, this is not the field I'm going to die on. If the council wants to do the temporary, I'm good with it. I'm not against having quality water for our people. But we're going to go from a 15% jump in 27, which is the next issue. But potentially we'll go from a 15% rate increase next year to a 35% rate increase next year. That's a significant jump. And anyway, that's my take on that. So I think I feel differently than everybody else, which is fine. Everybody else feels that we should do the temporary mitigation, so we should give you that guidance.
Well, for one thing, I think before anything were actually executed, it would come back before council. So if there was, I mean, at least on my part, what I would like to see is a refinement and a more legitimate quote on the numbers. And then if, as time goes on, the public comes to us and says, we're not interested in paying this in the bill, we think you will have the investment going in time, or if they say, yes, we think that this is a good thing, it's gonna come before council before we actually execute anything.
Well, the budget will, but I push back a little bit on the idea that you can't put out bids on the street for something that you might do. And you can't, vendors are not interested in filling out competitive bids for cities just to do shopping. I mean, you're not gonna have vendors that wanna do city.
Well, it
you
doesn't
know.
have to necessarily be the full competitive
Right.
bid process, but a refinement so that we have a more market-based knowledge of what the cost is versus one vendor giving us a verbal is what I'm looking for.
Yes, it does come back to the council in terms of the budget has to be approved. Yeah, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. So along those same lines, you know, we explored for a long time the difference between internal and going with an outside water source. We put that to bed earlier because we had a lot of research and a lot of comments from people that think, oh my gosh, it's that expensive and it's that complicated, I don't want to do it. That issue hasn't been talked about in the public very much, other than there's a temporary solution, it's going to be cheaper and it can be done fast. So I think as we explore that, you know, that we want to have something temporary, we need to explore that, like Councilmember Fernandez just said. Once the public gets out there how much it's going to cost per month, we may hear something different. So I think we need to pursue it, but we also, you know, have to vote on that somewhere.
Well, your points are well taken. If we put it in the budget and then we talk to the public more, we don't necessarily have to spend the money. Those are good points, good points, so. Councilmember Kravitz.
A couple points. There's an old saying, a million here, a million there, pretty soon you have real money. It is 20 million, not 25 for the temporary one. That's 10 million in 28, 5 million 29, 5 million in 30. That's at least based on the estimate here. So sure, it's a lot. I'm not sure what the delta is relative to our current operation. But the other thing to keep in mind is it's not only about the PFAS, it's also about our hard water. So our system that we currently have is in rough shape. I used to be a little bit skeptical about the hard water issue, but in the last year or so, which is, as I understand it, this issue's been going on for a little bit over a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. I have indeed noticed a lot of corrosion on stop valves in some of my properties, and also a lot of wear and tear on faucets where they're seriously corroding, and I think those might have to actually do with the hard water. And I've heard also many complaints from residents to that effect. So we are addressing two issues with the temporary solution. It isn't only about the PFAS, it's also about the hard water that we're currently not addressing with our lime scale filter or reactor. So in that regard, I do think it is worth it. We are also in a situation where we are under an obligation to comply with EPA rules coming up. It's not about the filter that you have in your refrigerator, which most people already have. Most people have refrigerators that dispense water now. Those will have a carbon filter in them that take out 70 to 80% of the PFAS, and that's not what is at stake here. What is at stake is that the city's under an obligation to provide a certain water quality, and we're not going to be able to comply by giving people individual home filters, even though some people have gone that route. And the other thing I'll just briefly point out, that with a project of the scale, we're going to have a competitive bidding process either way. I believe it's required that we will have to bid out for it. So we're going to have to see what's on the market one way or another. So I think for all those reasons, it makes sense to look into the temporary filtering solution also, because I think it would be terrible publicity for the city if we ended up applying for the extension. We'd be admitting that we can't meet the deadline. We'd be admitting that our water is still falling short. That's been in the news recently. If we have any possibility of addressing the problem now, as we should, not only with the PFAS, but also with the hard water, which I admit, the hard water is not a requirement, but our water is very hard. And I think it would be best for all of us to get ahead of this issue and put it to bed and make sure that everyone understands that Temple Terrace has really excellent water. Maybe we could even get it to the point where we have the best water in the whole region. And if we're going to have our own solution, that is what I would like to see. I think it's a real selling point, and people care about the water that they get. So those are my thoughts.
Hey, Mr. B.
Just to clarify before we run too far afield with the temporary solution, so just want to be clear that the granulated activated carbon temporary solution will not do anything for the water hardness. The nanofiltration, I think what you may be thinking about, Councilmember Kravitz, is the nanofiltration that was going to address the water hardness, as well as addressing the issue with the PFAS. The GAC, the temporary solution, won't do anything with the water hardening. In fact, that's why we have to change out the media every 45 days, largely to be driven by the fact that the water's so hard.
Well, thank you for that update. I remember when we were talking to CHA that they said that it would address the hard water as well as the PFAS. So that's the last state of play that I had in my mind. So if that's no longer the case, then I find that really unfortunate.
Yeah, I don't recall CHA saying that, because that's not what we've understood the whole time. So, but yes, so the granulate, that won't address the water hardness.
So there's no temporary solution we can do in order to address the hard water that we could combine with the temporary solution that we're already going to get?
The current softening system is severely aged and non-usable. So to add a temporary solution, essentially we would just replace that system. There was a cost component that was discussed on that, and with the nano, it wasn't a good path to go down to replace the current system, and then we would eventually tear it down and dispose of it. So a temporary solution would essentially be replacing what we currently have to soften the water.
Okay. And obviously there's no use for it once we have the permanent solution, because that will be a nanofilter, and then the nanofilter does not require a separate softening process. Okay.
One, not to confuse this anymore, I mean, not that this is confusing, but another element, just speaking to Mr. Warrenfeld's, as I mentioned, the reason we have to change out the media every 45 days is largely driven by the water hardness. If we were to change out create a softening system, again, not knowing what the long-term plan is, I don't understand exactly where the council wants to go just yet in terms of the long-term solution. It would likely address a little bit. Okay, it's a little bit. So it would address some of the hardening issues with the water that's passing through and requiring us to change out the GAC media every 45 days. We don't know the full impact of what that would do in terms of making it, whether it's every 45 days now versus now you could change them every 60 days. We don't have that. But just logically thinking about it here, it could address some of that. It's just we don't have enough information right now to do that. And obviously we'd have to figure out what the long-term solution is and whether that would be something we'd have to just tear out after.
Okay, so the prevailing guidance for you for budget purposes right now seems to be that the council wants you to pursue the local city water plant path as opposed to sourcing the water from the county, and that we want you to include the temporary mitigation in the budget. And we're moving now into the rate guidance component. And so where did I start last? I started over here. So Councilmember Fernandez, this end.
I would like to see the ability to phase that rate increase and not have a 35% rate increase in this budget?
I'm the same way. I'd like to see if we could space out so the big hit isn't the first couple of years.
I agree with the phasing. If possible, without destroying the rest of the numbers.
Councilmember Kravitz?
I'd like to see the rate increase front-loaded. I don't think we should phase it at all. I think that this is an infrastructure cost that's going to be going on for the next 40 years. I think that the people who have lived here in the last 40 years had the benefit of the previous infrastructure, and I think we need to get the cost out and start dealing with it. So, no, I think that we should have a high rate increase. We should absorb whatever the cost is. And then later, if we find out that we have the wherewithal, later on, we can reduce the rates if we reach our reserve levels as we're supposed to do, and we're paying the loan, and we have all of the equipment that we need, and it's all being properly maintained. I think overall, it seems pretty clear that in the last in the last infrastructure cycle, I'll say that some of the maintenance has not been done with the level of attention and speed that it should have been, or we'd have softer water right now, for one thing. So I think that on the whole, this is money well spent. And to the point about how much is this for, the next 3 or 4 years, I take the point if you divide by household, but we just had Mr. Napoli come and give us an analysis, and his breakdown was that it's maybe $15, $20 a month per household. So that's not the same as $3,600 over a few years. And I think most people would happily pay that in order to address this issue. And even if they don't want to happily pay for it, the alternative is that we connect to the county, which is apparently even more expensive. So there don't seem to be too many options here that go around a rate increase. And I'm generally not for postponing things that are inevitable. So if we do postpone it, what happens? We get a larger rate increase later, or we dip into our reserves. So I don't think either of those are better than just increasing the rate. It's supposed to be operated as an enterprise fund, so let's do that. Let's operate it as an enterprise fund. That's my thought.
I would like to see when we get to the budget or get to the vote, when this comes back to us, I'd like to see one more scenario. I think you got it already. I don't think it would be that hard to do. The scenario you have that includes the mitigation factor shows 35%, and I think it's 7 after that.
5% after that.
I thought it was 7 on the slide that you showed us that included the temporary. Oh, okay, all right, okay, I stand corrected then, okay. So I'd just like to see if we spread that temporary component over 3 years or whatever, because what it would look like. And then it would be easier to have further discussion before we vote if we had those couple of. Yep.
Yeah, so that's fine. We can work with Mr. Napoli and the financial advisor as well and try to put together that information. Question that I have is, there was some conversation here about, and this will impact the rate, that's why I bring it up, about just potentially just doing the temporary solution now. There's a couple of logistical steps. The CHA report, because it's the master plan for the facility, DOH is requiring, we do need to accept that report, which included a temporary solution in it. So that's just a bureaucratic step we'll have to do at some point over the next couple of months. But does council want us to pursue the nano and the temporary the way we originally presented today, or is council now leaning towards pursue the nano, just pursue the nano, because that'll impact, if we just say pursue the temporary, and then push off some of the other elements a couple of years, and then we'll regroup or revisit, or I just want to make sure I understand what the consensus is, because that'll impact what we're going to do with the budget.
Well, I think, and I'm going to open it up and we'll find out, but I don't think we abandoned the nanofiltration technology. I think we talked about the temporary in the meantime and pursuing the permanent. Is that what everybody's intent?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that what everybody's intent? Yeah. So we don't want to abandon the full. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just with the small caveat from my end that I'm like I said, I'm really skeptical about all the numbers that have been coming around. And I don't rule out the possibility that when we look more closely into the city option or into the county option, that those costs might actually converge or might become very different again, because, you know, as I said, the county option went from 20 to 35 to 50 to, I think, 60 or 70 when Mr. Talton came last, and now it's at 90 something. From what I can tell, all of that is just ballparking. And so I'm curious about that. I understand there's a lot involved there. I just have a lot of distrust in the numbers. No offense to staff or anyone who's been involved, but I just don't think that it's been looked at with the level of detail that I personally would want. And it's also quite possible that that is true for the city numbers, because we're still operating off of an estimate that's 2 years old almost. Those numbers could be significantly higher. We don't know, right? So at the end of the day, the 74 million, even if you only do an inflation adjustment, you're already looking at about 78, 79 million there. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more. So I think the difference between the two might be a lot smaller than we think. But in terms of the broad direction, definitely yes on the temporary solution. When it comes to the county connection, I honestly would like to see that explored, but I'm clearly in the minority. I think that it would be good to have an apples to apples comparison between the two with really up-to-date numbers. If that's beyond the capacity of what we can do, we can't get those numbers for whatever reason, then I'm happy to admit defeat on that, but it is what I would like. So that's my thought.
Just a point of clarification, because I don't know if I'm remembering this wrong. I thought the last report we got from CHA, I thought somebody had added an inflationary correction to their original report. Didn't we already get a corrected to add for inflation?
There is a small percentage of inflation at the end in their final numbers. Do you want to know what the percentage is?
No. No, but I mean, I thought we had talked about that, and there was a deficiency, no, a perceived deficiency in the first report, and they had done some corrections for inflation. The other thing is, I mean, I don't disagree. I'd love to have perfect numbers, but this whole discussion with the county about where the pipe is and where you could tie in and what route, I mean, didn't that all just take place we didn't have that number before, so yes, the number changed because we got a whole bunch of information that we didn't have.
Correct. So, I don't necessarily want to apologize. It's not really an apologizable kind of thing here, but I agree. I would love to have numbers that don't change. But the nature of this is that every time we go and we're talking to other folks the county's not going to commit to hire an engineering firm to focus on this and give us numbers that are absolutely foolproof. They admitted to us, they're doing back of the envelope math based on some of their recent project experience. So the recent project experience could be recent project experience, let's say in the last couple of months versus a year ago when got the original sort of back of the envelope numbers. So everybody's trying their best to get the right information as close as possible, but we all agree, no one is saying anything different here, that we all agree that we know that the numbers will likely change. They're going to change again as we get closer and things get more refined. So again, if this were an ideal situation, we would have, we'd come to you and say, look, this is the same numbers like you mentioned, Councilmember Kravitz. 2 meetings in a row, we got the same number. There's just a lot of technical details here with a lot of different scenarios, and so it's just been a challenge to get to that point.
Mayor, just going back to the report, so there was an assumed 5% annual inflation along with the in the 5-year projected projects. So CHA programmed 5% inflation in to their numbers.
Okay, well, it seems like we have given guidance on the 3 fundamental questions that we're here to do.
Have we?
Just to make sure I got the information correct. So we're pursuing for the budget purposes right now. We're going to pursue the city option. We're going to pursue the temporary solution. And although it wasn't unanimous, it sounded like the consensus was that we'd want to spread the rate out as much as possible. versus an upfront 35% increase.
I think what we, correct me if I'm misrepresenting, but I think we all would like to see at least one more model on that, because
We will see what the
we do have a bit of a divergence, and truthfully, I don't know until I see that, which, I mean, I'd like to see what that looks like.
Yeah. I think it's good to see two options on that too, for sure.
Okay. Anything else, staff, to council? Yes,
Just
Vice Mayor?
One quick comment. Thank you for the work, a lot of work you guys have done. Also, in my 8 years on council, I've never heard the word Delta used, and I've heard it a bunch today, so thank you. I do know what that means, but thank you.
Usually it's an airline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, we have a ribbon cutting at 12 o'clock, correct? And I would like to say again, I think I said it once already, this project is ahead of schedule and within budget. And, so I know that should be how it always is, but it's not. And so, very good. We'll see everybody there.
Yep.
And we are adjourned.